I start this video by thanking my Patreon supporters who help make it possible for me to make a living teaching subjects of my expertise in the world's most beautiful places, and to everyone who buys my books. Thank you so much. Well, so can you get us started today by telling us a little bit about what, just about yourself, what you do? Because there's so many different, I feel like, pots on these burners. What's your story?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's try and answer that as best I can. It's really just kind of all about having fun with it for me. Like, I enjoy writing, I enjoy the material. That's an inspiration. But this isn't really what I do in my day to day. I'm not educated formally in this material. It's just a big interest. My day to day I spend with architectural plans and things like that. I'm a landscape architect, but I spend a good chunk of free time geeking out on all things Norse, and then trying to make jokes about it. And yeah, it goes back to the early 2000s, I guess. McSweeney started in 2010, has been going ever since. But a lot of other writers have graduated from McSweeney's onto other things. I'm still there and just keep doing what I've been doing and trying to have fun with it. But
what is the origin of McSweeney's? Because when I first heard about it, I read The Onion real religiously in college and grad school. And then,
I'm familiar with that one.
Yeah, and then at some point became aware of McSweeney's as and of course the first thing I ever thought about it was, oh, this is something like The Onion, but it's not quite exactly like what were you in on the ground floor of that, or?
No, it started around 2000, actually. I don't know what year exactly, but the guy who started, his name's Dave Eggers, and he wrote, I think the book is called a heartbreaking work, a staggering genius, or something like that. And it kind of launched him into higher echelon of the literary world. And he started this quirky little humor website on the side at some point. I don't really know where all that time frame of that was or anything, but it tends to be a more literary, snarky sort of, page length and text. It's not really, there isn't a whole lot in the way of comic, visuals, things like that. It's generally very text based, and it's not fake news or fake headlines the way that The Onion does. In its early days, it was more oddball. It's become a lot more tied into current events in recent years, but the format has stayed the same. And so,
yeah, kind of a parody magazine to The Onion's parody newspaper, I guess.
Yeah, like a literary journal that decided to start being a goofball or something like that.
Yeah, right, like an alt New Republic or something.
Yeah, and so they have a formal magazine and everything too that's more serious, but the website just sticks to humor.
And is it vaguely Boston based, or is that just you? I mean,
so no, the editor is a different guy. He took over at some point, in the name of Chris Monks, and he lives in the Boston area, born and bred. And so when I first sent him this thing 13 years ago, he kind of got it right away. And, so lucky for me, I guess, in that sense, he took it and put it on the site. I was having fun with it. I sent another one, and eventually it turned into a column, and it just sort of grown since then. It's sort of now the articles are all kind of interlinked with one another, and my friend Matt Smith does illustrations for me now at this point, although it's still mostly a text-based thing. It's sort of evolved a little bit within its small confines, just being like an obnoxious drunk in Boston telling you about Viking stuff.
Yeah. Well, which also I should point out is something like the conceit of your most recent book, The Impudent
Yeah.
Edda. Is Matt Smith also the illustrator here?
Yes. Yeah. He did the two covers, and then the one, there's one on the inside back cover he did as well.
It's yeah, I mean, some drunk Boston guy telling you about Norse mythology sounds like, you know, roughly a description of the conceit.
Yeah.
What's kind of interesting to me is, you know, actually this kind of ties into something I was talking about with Tom Shippey a week ago, was just people who are connected to a place. You know, I hadn't quite realized before talking to him about his Hammer and the Cross trilogy from a few decades ago, how much his knowledge of Eastern England actually fed that story. And, you know, in the same way I have, you know, to the extent that I do creative work, not as much as you or he does, but creative or even just presentation work, you know, I'm very much of a place too. But like you are very much of a place, and oddly enough, I have to say it's a place less familiar to me than many places on other continents. I've never been to New England.
Oh no, yeah.
In my entire life. The closest I've ever been is New York. One weekend.
Yeah.
So like a lot of the local references are mysterious to me.
Yeah.
Although I do know what the Big Dig is because I've heard enough people complain about that.
Yeah.
So are you like, what, you know, I always kind of wonder about this with people who are somewheres, right? Because I feel like you and I are both somewheres, just different somewheres. Is it all familiarity, or is it like, is there a love of place there that's coming through, or is it more like just that's what you're so steeped in that it kind of comes out automatically? Like what's your relationship with Boston?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's a little all those things, I suppose. I've lived in New England most of my life, although I didn't actually grow up here. Actually, mostly grew up in Colorado. Yeah. So we moved around a lot, and so I've been out in New England most of the time, and it kind of always circumnavigating Boston, never Boston proper, but always the suburbs, or you know, the states are really small, you know, thereabouts. You know, getting to know a lot of people, playing hockey in the this is called the New England Senior Hockey League, which is just a, you know, recreational league for people who are, you know, not kids anymore. You know, there's various levels. You hear a lot in the locker rooms at in that league that really just kind of like can key you into the sort of a spirit that is conveyed in the book and the McSweeney's articles. But it's always been a place I've liked a lot and haven't really wanted to leave New England in general. So,
and yet you grew up in wait, where in Colorado did you grow up?
Aurora.
I'll be damned.
Yeah. So yeah, that was about 10 years childhood there. So,
well, I mean, you know, no offense to Aurora, but I don't know that it's exactly the kind of town that would enchant you with Colorado. But
yeah, like, from what I've gathered since, it's very kind of, well, I don't know. I've been back, I guess, but
it's all right. It's just not, but it's not like, you know, magical Colorado.
Right. You're not out in the mountains there.
But it's kind of interesting to me because I find that like people from Colorado tend to like love it or never talk about it again.
Yeah. It's kind of going to two extremes there.
Yeah. So I don't know if it sounds like you're on either extreme, but I wouldn't have ever guessed that because your stuff is so Boston local.
Yeah, it's pretty keyed in here. I mean, all my adulthood's been here and everything, but I mean, most people that you meet in the Boston area don't have the stereotypical Boston accent, but you come across it sometimes, and I definitely don't have it, and I wouldn't have had the chance to have one because I wasn't young enough when I was living there to develop one. But
You represent it on the page well. For example, when you're quoting from the original material of the Codex Bostonia in your latest book. Actually, that's a could you explain a little bit of the conceit of the Impudent Edda?
yes, so it's posited as the third and final volume of the Edda trilogy, which I imagine most folks will know that the other would be the prose and poetic, and it's just really basically a big gag, or I hope it's a gag. And the idea is somebody at a bar in Boston just went off on Norse mythology one night, got recorded on their phone, intentionally or unintentionally is not stated, and that phone was later found in a alleyway and really analyzed and obsessed over and regarded as this new literary treasure that reveals all sorts of things about the gods and their ongoings that sometimes correspond to the other two Eddas and other sources from that era, sometimes not so much, but hopefully keeping in the same spirit, in terms of Thor doing what Thor does, etc. He's not a break in a character sort of development or anything like that. Mm-hmm. And it's wrapped up in a package that is basically a parody of a Penguin classic.
Yeah, I noticed the publisher's mark is Puffin Carcass.
Yes.
I appreciate making fun of some of these publishers.
Good to hear.
Yeah, I've had anyone who's bounced around in this world has opinions about a bunch of these places.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially given some of the people they publish.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what started this? What got you working on because I've seen your Norse mythology for Bostonians. Was it kind of like originally going to be kind of like a compilation of that stuff? What turned it into what it became?
Okay. So yeah, those two are really very related, and the current one, the Impudent Edda, has a lot of overlap with Norse mythology for Bostonians, which was essentially the same thing, but shorter and with a lot of intentional misspellings just to try and encapsulate the whole Boston dialogue better. It was considered a transcription. I mean, I called it a transcription. I'm making it all up, but I called it a transcription and misspelled it accordingly throughout the text, but it still had the footnotes, and it didn't explain any of the more specific Boston references. So I did that just as a gag for myself. A lot of the material had already appeared on McSweeney's, so it just occurred to me that this would be funny. I'm going to take what's on McSweeney's and create this Penguin classic parody, basically, and it'll be just sort of a gag gift type of book. There's an element of gimmick to it, but as a joke in the New England area, I thought it would have some appeal. And it did better than I had expected because I basically got no backing of any sort on it, but it got into some stores and it does pretty well there. And other people who are interested in this stuff started to apparently read the book, and I'd seen some comments about it, and one individual in particular, Bjorn Larson, is a writer in the Netherlands, posted a comment that said, this was his favorite Norse mythology retelling, if only he could have read it a little easier, or something to that effect.
Huh.
And that set in my mind the seed to, well, I could take the parody a step further and actually translate my fake transcription and expand on it, provide explanations for some of the Boston references, maybe substitute some out that are, so they don't really add anything to it, just kind of certain substitutions happen there. And just take it to that next level. I'd thought of maybe writing the original Norse mythology for Bostonians in sort of a standard English at the time, but then I was like, no, I'm just going to do it with the intentionally incorrect spelling, just because that's what I had been doing, and just whatever comes will be what it is, and okay. And
yeah, some of the heavy Boston stuff is, it's a little tough.
Yeah.
Like page 20 in the editorial note on the translation, which, by the way, I appreciate being the sort of like pseudo scholarly intro to this phone somebody has found. Right next to this Interstellar, I can't do the accent. Like my sole reference for like a Boston accent is probably early Matt Damon movies.
Yeah.
A couple questions. I think in the spirit of your work here, Greg asks: is Worcester hell or just the edge of the world?
So what was the question?
If you look in the chat, you'll see the Patreon chat. Is Worcester hell or just the edge of the world?
It's a Worcester.
Is that how I'm supposed to say that?
Yeah, it's pronounced different than you would think based on the spelling.
Worcester.
Yeah, Worcester. It's a rhetorical question, I think, that he's asking. It's not one of the nicer spots in the state of Massachusetts, but yeah, you go there for, I don't know, I guess if you know people, sometimes there's events. Don't have a whole lot of positive things to say about it, but it exists. It's okay.
Okay. I just realized that the other literary connection, such as it is, to New England is, in college I read a bunch of H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah. I
guess he sets a lot of his stuff around that part of the world.
Yeah. Boston and Providence, and there's a lot, a big one for him.
I think the Chester name reminded me of that.
Yeah.
And Greg also asked, what is the general state of Leif Erikson awareness in Boston like?
Not as high as I'd like it to be. But
this is one of your great projects, right? Is increasing or failing to increase Leif Erikson awareness.
Yeah. I think I'm succeeding at the failing part. I'll post stuff about it from here and there online, and made some stickers that I went around Boston that said, Leif Erikson was here, at a picture of his there's a 120 something like that year old stone tower in the western suburbs of Boston that was at the time it was built on the spot of Leif Erikson's home in Vinland. At least that's what they claimed, in the late 1800s. And so it's still there. There's a statue of him in the back bay. There's a kind of a stone marker. It sort of looks like a gravestone laid horizontally that says this was his house, site of his house on the banks of the river. You know, these are just forgotten relics that were wrong in the first place, but there's something amusing about them, I think. And
Yeah,
so
there's actually something I think of scholarly interest there, just in like, I mean, actually something that Brenna talks about some is like this, there's a term for this. It's like neo-medievalism or post-medievalism or something. It's like studying the history of the modern reception of medieval stuff,
okay, yeah,
right? Which has a fascinating history vis-a-vis Vikings in New England. I mean, there's that tower in is it Rhode Island that people have claimed forever is built by Vikings or
yeah.
something.
Newport, Rhode Island's got that one.
And there's the main penny, which I guess is a real penny. It's just a question of how it got there and when.
Yeah.
Huh.
Unknown.
It's like, do you find, I mean, do you ever find yourself just, I don't know, what's a stereotypical Boston thing to do? Is it the Red Sox? Is that the correct Sox? Which Sox are in Boston?
It's the correct Sox. Yeah.
Okay. Do you ever find yourself at a Red Sox game eating clam chowder and and drinking Sam Adams and turn to someone and you know, try to explain this stuff? I mean, what is, so we've talked a little bit about the Scandinavianist reception. What is the Bostonian reception of your work?
Yeah, another good sort of tough question. I think that there were more people aware of it, at least the McSweeney's origin point, than I had realized. Just based solely on some people I've come across it. There have been a couple of events that have happened over the last several years at a local area breweries, and people came out to those knowing what it was, and you know, that was encouraging. And I didn't really go into it necessarily expecting a turnout at all. So that'd be one thing, and then just started seeing commentary online of people who've come across this and clearly relate to what some of the jokes are about, like the public transportation system would be a big one. And I've seen a couple comments online about, oh yeah, okay, Loki and Thor didn't have a great day riding the train that day because the train system sucks. So, you know, we understand why, because we live in the Boston area. So,
Sure.
yeah.
I'll ask you a question that I get asked, you know, every interview, it seems like. So maybe you also have the same experience and maybe are tired of answering it. So tell me to shut up if you want. But but now I'm curious, landscape architect, what's the connection to Norse stuff? What got you into this?
Between those two, there isn't really a, you know, landscape architecture and Norse stuff. There isn't really a connection. The Norse stuff is just something I've always, you know, been interested going back to, you know, childhood. But, you know, I went down a different path, I guess, in terms of just what I do now. But
you decided to make money.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of. It's probably not the greatest path for that either, but it's okay, I suppose. But there is a connection in terms of like Scandinavian things, which is, I'd done a study abroad in Sweden, and later on I got a fellowship through the American Scandinavian Foundation to go to Sweden, and so that really kind of sort of solidified that, I guess, starting point.
That's a big deal, by the way. Congratulations to your younger self, I suppose. That those scholarships are hard to get.
Yeah, I was very grateful, and it was a great experience, and you know, I didn't want it to end when it did.
Where were you?
Where? Norrköping.
Okay.
So yeah, it was related to landscape architecture and city planning. It's a old mill town, so it's sort of about the redevelopment that happened there. Nothing Norse related again, but it helped develop a good familiarity with the country and the language and just kind of how things work there. And some of my writing isn't all about Norse stuff, but sometimes just more about like Scandinavian culture and different periods of history. So that sort of is probably the connective thread, I guess, between it all.
All various things you can read about at scandinavianaggression.com.
Yes, exactly.
Let me remind anybody in the chat, if you feel like throwing questions out there, you are welcome to. I was just trying to think of when you and I first ever communicated. It was probably on Twitter. And I feel like it might have been fairly long ago, because I feel like at some point we talked like very briefly, very randomly, when you were writing for McSweeney's and I was still writing the Star Wars thing.
Yeah.
Like I think somebody connected us, like this might have been 2011 or something.
It sounds familiar, and it goes back into that decade, which is the not the clearest memory, I guess, at this point. But I remember the Star Wars thing. I know I had emailed a bit with Eleanor Rosamund Barclow. Not sure if I said her name correctly. And I know I think she was like, "Oh, you need to check out your Star Wars saga," and also mentioned Rick Riordan's Magnus Chase young adult Viking novels. But
I've still never seen those.
It's fun for if you're a kid or looking for a kid type of a read. It has a Boston connection, which is I guess the relevant part. Yeah. But yeah, so the Star Wars thing was early on, and I don't remember what the communication thread was exactly, but I know I put a blog post on my blog, Scandinavian aggression thing, about some of what you were doing at some point.
That might be what
ago.
That might be when we talked. Yeah. Have you enjoyed any other humor connected to this stuff? Like, isn't there that Norseman show?
Yes, yeah. I enjoyed Norseman. It was very crude, but I thought it was a lot of fun. It definitely, the first season, pokes a lot of fun at history's Vikings, which I thought deserved it, and it was just sort of an over the top fun show in its own right. Don't really come across a whole lot of humor dealing with this stuff. There's a novelist in England named Tom Holt, who's kind of like a lesser known Terry Pratchett or Douglas Adams, has written a couple of books dealing with the theme. Tom Holt.
HOLT.
Yeah, he wrote something called like Who's Afraid of Beowulf that has nothing to do with Beowulf. It's just I think the publisher must have forced him into that title or something. It's my speculation. I don't know that. Bjorn Larson, who I mentioned in the Netherlands, has written a fairly funny book. I recently read Greg's, who's on here. It was more of an adventure novel, but it was a humorous, lighthearted one. Beyond that, I kind of start drawing a blank, and I don't know why there isn't more in the.
I mean, as you know, the interesting thing about the audience that's informed about this stuff is that it's surprisingly big, but it's not really concentrated anywhere.
Yeah.
So
the world.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think that's part of what's kind of amusing about, your Boston connections is that an American deeply immersed in this stuff, writing for like a sort of, writing with localized references, you would almost expect to be from like Wisconsin.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like where there's so much concentrated Scandinavian heritage and people and lots of like clubs and stuff dedicated to that. Boston is amusingly random,
Yeah.
as far as that goes.
True.
Have you done any public events outside of Boston?
No. It's all been in Massachusetts. So you know,
I feel like you
yeah.
need to do like a Minneapolis event, and just toward the end of the question and answer period or something, like just before you're going to get off stage, just lean right into the mic and tell them that the Kensington Runestone is a fake. And
Get
see
everybody set off as you walk off the stage.
yeah, see if you can get to the airport before they
Yeah.
string you up from a tree.
Yeah. Classic chase scene on the freeway.
I was
Yeah.
with Henrik Williams in Minneapolis once, and he gave a talk to some, I can't remember what the group was, but it was some Scandinavian heritage group like that. And of course, he's talking about legit runestones, so much to say. Fascinating guy, and all anybody wants to know about is the Kensington runestone. Like,
It's just they're just fixated on it there because it's kind of local in
yes,
their
it's
state.
just like I felt like I was about to have to be, like his backup, get into the door, like, all right, like you head for the back, I'll be, I'll got your six.
Yeah. Protect the exit strategy.
It got surprisingly I don't know if I want to say the word heated, but like it's surprising how intense
Really?
people can be.
Yeah. I guess
Blake
some
asks,
pride in it, I guess.
kind of, yeah, I guess. Blake asks, to what extent do you engage with the universities in the area?
I don't. Yeah, I have been sort of detached from university life in all capacities for some time. So yeah, I guess unfortunately I don't really have an answer to that because I haven't, like, I get to the Harvard area often. I go to the bookstore there. I usually stock my books, but and I look at Harvard across the street, but that's kind of it. So yeah, sorry, I don't have more to say on
I feel like there's people there who have a good sense of humor.
yeah. Well, I
Joseph,
guess I'm sorry. I started to cut you off there. I apologize.
No, I was just thinking, Joseph Harris is a pretty funny guy. Stephen Mitchell can be pretty funny.
Yeah, I never interact with them, but I have met John Sexton, the East Bridgewater State University. He's one of the guys who hosts Saga Thing podcast. And so yeah, I've not really had any involvement with the university itself, but he's a professor there, and that would probably be like the one exception.
And Barry mentions Scandinavian themed retirement homes that are roughly in the Boston area.
Oh, yes.
What does that mean?
So there's something called the Scandinavian Cultural Center in Newton, Massachusetts, which is the location is probably like 8-9 miles west of downtown Boston. And it's, as its name would suggest, a cultural center for all things Scandinavian. It's got a little library, a little coffee shop, a little event room, but it's also inside a retirement community, which is they call it the Scandinavian Living Center, I think is the name. And so it's just this one little faucet of this larger living community. And while the two are connected, and they don't like hide the fact that they're connected, if you look look them up online or just anything like that, you might not necessarily realize what it is you're walking into if you go to it because they're having a filming or like fika Saturdays or Sundays or something like that in the afternoon. They're at their coffee shop, but there is an event center there, and did participate in something there a year and a half ago. It was just fun. A reading that a couple other individuals were present at, but
Sounds like
it's usually
it could be fun.
Yeah, but it creates an eclectic mix of I guess participants or audience members or something, because you got people who show up for the thing, and then you have people who are living there, and they just kind of wander in.
Well, I guess for that matter, I kind of ran a Scandinavian themed dorm
Oh yeah,
at the University of Wisconsin. So, yeah,
sounds fun.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. It was this whole building that was just different floors were for students who were studying different languages, and you were hypothetically supposed to only speak that language in the dorm.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you can imagine how well that worked out, but it was one of the jobs they would give to grad students in the Scandinavian department was to run the Scandinavian wing.
Okay.
So it was, yeah, probably sort of similar. Like I was supposed to do, like fikas and stuff like that for them.
Host little gatherings and disseminate information related
as well as I could.
Yeah.
Actually, I was still friends with a bunch of those people.
So if I'd been there, that's the dorm I would have wanted to be in. So, but
it's actually a pretty good situation.
Yeah.
Well, would you be interested in giving us a little taste of the Impudent Edda while we're here? Would you want to give us a little? I mean, you got a couple. Well, not a couple. You have a bunch of shorter stories in here. Odin experiments of public vagrancy.
Yeah.
Some chapter titles that I would hesitate to read, perhaps.
Yeah.
Divine hands make good wolf fodder.
Okay. No. Oh, so you're meaning like read one of these segments or something like that?
Yeah, maybe give us a taste of your style here.
Sure. As you probably are aware,
and don't worry about. Yeah, I was gonna say, don't worry about language. I think this is
okay. Yeah, I
I'll put TV 14 or whatever in the corner.
Right. I don't actually swear a ton myself, but it's in the spirit of the anonymous poet who this was.
You want me to bleep you out?
That's fine. I'm trying to find one that might be a good being indecisive. Well, let's just go with the Odin vagrancy one. That was a one you mentioned.
All right.
All right. So okay, it's the halfway through the book. It's called Odin Experiments with Public Vagrancy, and it's one of the 9 segments in the book that isn't backed up by the prose or poetic Edda. So most of it is still grounded in that, but this is a little this is one of the originals.
But I find that more like I'm kind of. I think it shows your familiarity with the characters to take them and put them into new story. Like to me, that's a particular. I don't know. I think it calls for a lot of creativity. So.
Yeah. Well, thanks. Yeah. Well, here we go then. All right. Take a sip of water first. I'm a quiet person by nature, so. Whistle.
Take a sip of oil.
Yeah. All right. So one of Odin's most favorite hobbies is disguising himself as a nameless wanderer and roaming around all over Middle Earth. Although he does stand out quite a fucking lot since he usually dresses up in some gray robes and a full brim fucking hat. Takes a walking stick with him, so he's not exactly inconspicuous. But anyway, one day he gets his outfit on and he leaves his house and he decides to take a fucking train into town. So now he's wandering around the common and the public gardens and he's watching the fucking swan boats glide around and taking quick nips out of the bottle that he's got hidden down his brown paper bag under his robes. And so, of course, everyone's giving him real strange looks because they're like, who's that fucking freak? And you know Odin, he's an old man, oldest man out there that there is actually, and he feels like a fucking mortal human when he goes out on his bizarre little sojourns like this. And so in his old age, he's getting wicked tired from all this roaming around. And so he finds a nice park bench there in the shade and he lays down on it and he fucking nods off for a while till some cop eventually comes along and wakes him up and makes him move on since, he's creeping everyone else out since drunk bums aren't supposed to pass out on the benches right next to the playground where all the little kids are playing, especially if they have a history of being sex offenders like Odin does. So then he decides, hey, why not go for a fucking stroll down Newberry Street? Weather's never been nicer, and the cop didn't search him and find his bottle. So he continues onwards, and now he's passing all the upscale shops and restaurants and shit. And he's starting to stumble since he's gotten pretty far into his bottle at this point. But he keeps going since he's on one of his wandering missions, and Odin's not the type of guy to give up so easy, unless it's to commit suicide. And so even though he stops off a few times to rest on some of the stoops at some of the finest restaurants, he eventually makes it down to the end of the street. But then when he goes to take another swig of his barely concealed firewater, he finds out it's completely fucking empty. So shit, and Odin's like real fucking sad. He can't wander aimlessly if he's not got a beverage to help keep him company. So he gets this idea to go around the corner over to McGreevy's and see if he can't order a few shots in there. So when he goes, and of course he's looking like a complete fucking weirdo and whatnot, but the bartender's like, the guy's paying cash, so at first he serves him and everything's all right till the creepy old geezer starts trying to hit on some of the much younger ladies sitting by him. And well, Odin's a real vulgar motherfucker, so this isn't just your usual harmless old guy commentary, but he's making some real strong passes at him with thinly veiled references to his wiener, and it's just getting ugly. And the bartender's realizing this crazy old bastard's causing trouble, so he asks him to settle up and leave. And Odin refuses, and the situation goes south real fucking fast. And next thing you know, he's being escorted out the door and tossed onto the fucking pavement. So he gets up, spews his guts out all over the hood of the nearest parked car, and then he continues to stumble across the street, thinking, maybe he'll just go into the library where it's all warm and nice and find a cozy little corner somewhere where he can pass out amongst the books, since he fucking loves sleeping surrounded by books, since he loves the knowledge they contain. But it's fucking super late at night now, and the doors are all locked. And so he sits down on the steps in front of the fucking place and passes out till morning like a fucking loser.
Of course, all this is accompanied in the book with learned footnotes.
Yeah, and there's an explanation as to what the location is and bar and the street and everything.
And a footnote about other instances of Odin's solo travels of Middle Earth. Yeah. Well, is this inspired by someone you observed?
No one that I observed in particular. I mean, I have observed characters like this in bars in the area. Like that's not a totally, unheard of, uncommon thing. But in terms of a specific sequence of events, it just was something that made sense to me based on the geography of the area. Like it's pretty common to like kind of mix these sites in together at out for a day in that part of Boston, and it's not uncommon to see people perhaps sleeping it off near the library here on its steps, or it's a pretty big, impressive library, and it's so I like to think it fits the place fairly well.
Blake asked what the editing process for your work is.
Well, the editing process was basically I took the older book, the Norse mythology for Bostonians, which comprises the majority of this one, and just went to town on it because it's full of misspellings and yeah, grammatical mistakes, things like that. Just so I did that, and then I just proofread the hell out of it. I haven't really done more than that for the Boston stuff, but I have another book called The Scandinavian Aggressors, which I did have somebody formally kind of do it more of an editorial proofreading type of process, because that's presented as well, not I shouldn't say presented, as it is just like a normal book. Like that's not a slang ridden, intentionally misspelled, trying to capture an accent and then trying to correct the mistakes in a new edition.
Mhm.
Yeah. But the Boston stuff I kind of just tackling myself. I guess that's a long-winded way of saying that.
Yeah, Blake asked about peer reviews. I don't know exactly what that would look like in this case.
Peer reviews.
Who is your peer in this respect? I don't know.
It's a good question. I sent out a number of the early copies and incorporated any feedback that I got, but for the most part, it just goes. At this point, because I'm still writing them for McSweeney's. There's stuff on that website that is not in the book about the gods, and at this point, I write it misspelled, like in Bostonian. I don't write it and then go in and like change it to that. I just write it that way, and I send it off to the guy who runs the website, and that's kind of it. To make the book, there's certainly more involved, but it was basically just me. It's a very DIY operation.
Greg asked if there will be an audiobook.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. There's no plans of it in the moment.
I wonder if you could make it like deliberately almost incomprehensible. Just
Yeah.
thickest Boston accent in the world.
Yeah. Like actually have, I don't know how audiobooks have footnotes of their own, where you can like skip to the end and see what it was saying or anything like that. But I could see that being a fun just take it to the next level of parodic whatever.
I think it could be pretty funny. About around 2010, I listened to an audiobook of that book that was super popular back then. Is it Dr. Norrell and Mr. Strange or something like that? That's
Heard of
super
that,
long
but
novel.
I've never read it, but I know what you mean.
It's full of footnotes, and the audiobook reader just kept, every time there was a footnote, would say footnote, and then read the footnote, and then it was, I don't know, it did kind of break one out of the experience. It's actually something we struggled with. Yeah, we've struggled with it with my Havamale edition, is how to do this exactly when there's a lot of commentary and stuff. Like, when do you do this?
Break the flow, but provide the information that needs to be there.
Yeah, it's sort of hard to figure out how to do, but we also need to figure out a different audiobook provider if we do that. But that stuff gets fun. Well, other questions from the audience? I see Barry considers you to have no peers.
Oh, well,
so
thanks, Barry.
I would say that's accurate. I don't know anybody else who writes this kind of stuff. And I'm kind of surprised, like I said, at you saying you didn't have an academic background in this. I figured you had to have gotten, just from how you obviously read this stuff a lot. I figured that you must have been somehow, one way or another, in one of these departments at some point. Greg asked, are the leprechaun executions pretty popular out there, or do they make the Celtics fans nervous?
Thanks, Greg. That's a reference to my other book, which called The Scandinavian Aggressors. It's the one that's not got really anything to do with Boston. And sort of a fantasy Viking thing, but there's leprechauns that get enslaved by Vikings in it. Not executed, just enslaved. They and they're kept in Norway, so the Celtic types in Norway I don't think are too worried.
Worth checking out. And then of course with the Impudent Edda, which will be out when is the
22nd of November, so coming up
less
in
than a month.
a month, yeah.
The artist is cool. There's also, I mean, this one back here is kind of like, it's kind of hidden on the back,
Yeah.
inside the back jacket, but it's a fun little picture.
Yep. Fenrir.
Odin offering Fenrir
Yes.
a doggy treat.
Trying to lure him into a sense of security.
Yeah. Reminds me of myself with some friends' dogs.
Yeah.
Well, Rowdy, thank you so much, by the way, for the time here, and also for sending me an early copy of the Impudent Edda. I think folks will enjoy this. And Barry asked whether this was recorded. Yeah, it's all recorded, and I will put this on YouTube probably next week.
Awesome. Well, great. Thanks so much for having me. Really appreciate it. It's fun to talk to you. After being aware of what you've been doing for so long. It's cool.
For better or worse, right?
Yeah.
It's fun to talk to you face to face. I was trying to think if we had ever met, and I'm sure we haven't.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I haven't been to any events that would be kind of, I guess, relevant outside of Massachusetts. I mean, I still have family in Colorado. I get out there once or twice a year typically, but
Well, hit me up.
Yeah, I got a. Last time I was there, I made him pull this out of the they had to go dig it up because they said that you were coming in like a week later and it was in the spring, but they were running short at the time. So
I was there 2 days ago or something, because I needed to get one I never have copies of my own books.
Yeah.
Like basically as soon as I get them, I give them to somebody.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh man, I need one. And it was the only place I knew I could get one that day. So I stopped in, and it was kind of a funny experience for me because it was the first time I had dealt with anybody there who didn't know who I was.
Oh yeah.
And I was in a huge hurry because I was late for this thing. So I'm like, I don't want to take, like, this is going to be a longer conversation if I say who I am. And so this is like, what Jackson Crawford books do you have? This person's like, well, I can get you the autograph copies. Like, no, I don't need them. It's like, well, it doesn't cost more. I'm like, no, it's fine. Like,
yeah, it's whatever's quickest on hand, but it's
it's like, no, seriously, like, would you like an autograph copy? It's like leave that for somebody else. Like,
yeah.
But anyway, well, sir, it's been fun to talk to you. We should meet up next time you're here, or if I happen to be in Boston.
Yeah, always let me know if you are, or I mean, I'm not super close to Boston, but I'm in the area, so but
okay.
I can't get in regularly, and yeah.
Sounds like you're more likely to be over here. So yeah, just hit me up. You know my email.
Yeah, all right, yeah, I will do. Probably be there around holiday season. So
okay,
if you're around at all, I'll let you know.
All right, likely enough. Cool. Well, best wishes to you, and
to you as well.
Everybody, check out the Impudent Edda and Patreon. Thank you so much, and all the best to everybody.
Yeah, thanks a lot, everyone. Thanks, Jackson.